Morning, everybody. Um, let's have a little prayer to start out with. Dear Lord, our God, our Father in heaven, fill us with the Holy Spirit today so your word may come through us and through you. We thank you for all you do for us. Bring the word to our heart this morning as we go through this. Watch over everybody today. I think of somebody I've never heard of coming up here to the pulpit. I pray for his speech and his message. In Jesus I pray. Amen. Well, as I said, we're going to do Esther. And we're going to not skip, we'll do Job next week. There's just too much between the two of them, and we can't do justice to either one of them, doing them in 40 minutes. Queen Esther. Let's talk about the times and what was going on in the world at this time. There's one thing about Esther you'll notice. If you Google it, God's not mentioned. Worship is not mentioned. The only thing that's something we normally think of the Israelites is sackcloth and ashes. But Persia was known for sackcloth and ashes too. That wasn't just the Israelites that did that. A lot of cultures did that. They mourn with sackcloth and ashes. When bad things would happen, sackcloth and ashes. Fasting is something that comes in here. And I didn't look and see if the others did fasting, but normally Jews do fasting for a day. They're more of a day faster. Like they have once a year that they have a holiday that they fast for 24 hours. But for 3 days is something a little more severe. And with fasting will come prayer. They don't mention prayer in here. Prayer's not mentioned. But when they're in sackcloth and ashes, that is a norm for Jews. That is praying as part of that. So we don't see God in this mentioned. But there's a lot of other things. A lot of authors do such things. They don't mention it. I watched the Christian college that we went down in Southern. They have teachers on that online class that do this. And I listened to one of them that does this class. And she said that she must be a literature scholar because she talked about literature. And she says, there are books that are all about something, but it's never mentioned by name all the way through the book. I can't remember the name of the book, but there was a lot of cheating going on in there. And those words that go with cheating never came up. So it's not unusual in literature for that to happen. This book is almost like literature. It's a story. It's got a plot. It's got a hero. And the hero comes from nothing to amazing in the end. And when we stop a chapter, we'll talk about where do we see God in this chapter. Because that's part of even he wrote in his little book about that. We'll start out with, this whole thing started a long time ago. Let's see, that's on. I got notes on things. You think Sam needs to keep track of notes? Yes, he got notes this time. It was 1,000 years earlier. Do you remember the Amalekites? Speaking in the Bible about the Amalekites, well, they had a king named Agar. And you would remember that because Samuel says, "Oh, what do I hear? The bleating of sheep?" And is that the king? You were supposed to have killed him, the Saul. Well, that was the king. And there's been bad blood between our house and their house because he never killed them all like he was supposed to. So Haman, our evil one in the story, he's an Amalekite. And so there's bad blood between him and the Jews. So he doesn't just hate him because he doesn't respect him there. He's hating him because, oh, I already hate you for what you did in the past. And yeah, that kind of moves on. And we start in chapter 1. And Esther is when Babylon took them into captivity. Hang on, got to switch books. No, that ain't what I want to switch to. Here. All right. In 930 BC, of course, all are going to be BC. It was a breakup of Israel and Judah. We all know the story of that. We did that story here not long ago. And Babylon carried off the southern tribe in 586. Okay, we got to remember that numbers are going to go down. That means time's getting more down the line. I always got to get my head wrapped around that time is not upward, it's downward now. So the closer to zero, the closer to Jesus' time. And I'll give you some other numbers here. Okay, in 485, which was another almost 100 years, Babylon loses a war to Persia. And that's starting the reign of Xerxes as king. And he reigned for about 20 years, 485 to 465. And he had 127 provinces, as we're told in the first chapter, right above. And let's see, anything else I want to talk about here? I've talked about how the book is. Oh yeah, well, this is a story type book, and we think of David. That's a story, right, about Abednego and all them, and about him, and now that's a story. But God's mentioned in that. All the other books that God has in the Bible, He's usually mentioned in them. And this book is not like an epistle to help people. This book is not like Numbers or the law. It's different. It doesn't have God in it. It's not trying to teach us something or tell us how to do something, or it's not the lineage of someone. It's different than all the rest of the books in the Bible. And I'll ask you that at the end of every chapter, and we'll see what we can find here. Yeah, he's still working there. He's harder to see in some of the chapters than the others. Okay, I'll get moving on. Well, we know how the story's going to start. Let's see here. Hang on. Make sure I got through everything I wanted to talk about to begin with. Yeah. Okay. Well, Xerxes ruled over 120 provinces. He was probably the most powerful man alive at the time, as far as kings go. Suzanne, I'm not very good at pronouncing that one. Third year of his reign, he held a banquet. He gave a banquet. 180 days. That's 6 months. Do you suppose they maybe moved from province to province and had one? I don't know. It doesn't tell me that. But what do you do for 180 days? Yeah, a lot of drinking probably. And now during evidently that 180 days that you were held for a limit on how much you could drink, so nobody got drunk terribly. And he showed them everything he had in that. His vast wealth was amazing at the time. By the book. And then he decided at the end, that was fun enough, but we didn't get drunk. Let's have a 7-day banquet now with unlimited booze. And that's what he did. And on this last day, 7th day, when he was feeling high in spirits, he wanted to call for Queen Vasky. Now, an interesting thing about their queens in that days, most of the time in Persia, if a king needed a queen, he would go to another royal family. In other words, we'd make, as David's son did, made a lot of friends and allies by marrying someone. That was their norm. That's what they always did. So Vasky probably came from another royal family, possibly. And so he sends for her and tells her to come and wear her crown. Now, most scholars say he wanted to wear her just her crown. And she was, what was she doing? She was entertaining all the rest of the women of the palace. And you think, rest of the women, how many women did they have there? Well, he had several women, I'm sure. He had his concubines. And by the way, concubines, we'll move ahead just a second, but Esther, when she was brought in, she brought all these women from all over all these beautiful virgins. Well, there's one thing is sure, they weren't going to be virgins when he was done. One thing, they would never go home again. They would stay in the palace as concubines. So it wasn't a great thing. It wasn't anything fabulous for them. They were going to live in the palace, restricted on what they could do, restricted on who they could see. As you've seen later on, Esther sends messengers. She's capable of that as a queen. And she got, we'll move on here. Anyway, he sends for her. And she doesn't want to do that. For one thing, she's sitting in front of a pile of women, and she doesn't want to look weak, especially with his request for her to wear just a crown. And so she says no, thinking he'll hear it and go, okay, he's drunk. He probably won't bother. Well, she knew she was taking a chance, because to say no to the king was quite bad. He could do about anything he wanted to with you. But what's he do? He asks his wise men, well, what do I do? Oh, come on, make up your mind. You're a king. You know what you can do. But they tell him, she can be, this could be, they got talking. This could be bad. All the women could hear about this, and they won't come, and they won't do what we tell them to do. Because you remember where we are. Women are more possessions than they are. And most kings didn't have what we say with our wives. We have personal relationships with our wives. They did not. It was like, I call you for the evening and go back home. They didn't have a all-day relation with them. And they didn't sit on the throne next to them either. So she didn't show up. Well, then he makes a law. That's quite the thing in his drunkenness. makes a law, and once he makes a law and seals it with that signature ring, that's law's law. He can't even take it back. He can't say, oh, I'm going to write up and I'm going to take that back. No. Once you make a law, there's no changing it. Don't that sound like a wonderful country? Somebody could get drunk and make a law and you're stuck with it? Yeah. Wonderful. Huh? But anyway, he makes this law that she can't be in his presence. She cannot never come back in his presence. So she is relegated away. Some say he just sent her to a palace somewhere he had somewhere else, and she was kept there. Not killed, not destroyed, just moved out of his presence. She couldn't be queen anymore. So, a bunch of drunken people come up with a plan to go get every beautiful virgins from all over the area and bring them in, and then he could try them out and find himself a wife. Well, in a drunken stoop, that probably sounded pretty good. There's one thing. They went and got all these virgins. Let's see, there's this. What was the royal treatment? They had to have the royal treatment. How long was that? Okay, she refused him. And I can't remember. It was when it's 6 months of something and 6 months of something else. Yeah, I'll find it here. Virgins. Well, anyway, they had to go through this beauty treatment. Had a long time of beauty treatment. And so you think, oh, hey, he's not even going to be able to be with one until all that beauty treatment's over with. Well, he had something going on in between there and there. Let's see, I've got even the time period of it. Okay. Wait a minute. Is that chapter 2? Have you seen God in chapter 1 yet? Not much. Do you see anything in chapter 1 where he kicks her out okay, and you really didn't see God there, did you? Speaking, moving, but it was moving. He got Vashti out of the way. He got the king's wife out of the way there, and we don't think that's part of the plan, but it's got to be part of the plan to put Esther in. So he didn't move here, but we really don't kind of see that. In this world, do we have the same thing? We don't see him moving sometimes, and he's really moving. He changes something so something can happen, and we don't know that. That's the thing. He's always moving in our lives and changing things and moving. And, he's got to take somebody out of a place before he can put somebody in. And he might use somebody that you wouldn't think for a task. We've seen that in the Bible. So we move on to chapter 2. And now they're searching for the beautiful women throughout the thing. And let's see. And Mordecai becomes more in. He's always in the sitting at the gate. And that's kind of the way it does with him. He is involved. He's trying to stay involved with Esther. He's told her not to tell him that she's a Jew. Because most of the women are from the Persian Empire, and he's worried. Is he worried that they're going to bother her, or she'll be thought of differently, or something? He doesn't want her to tell them anything about that. And she does make, when she's brought in, she makes Haggai, she makes a friend of him immediately, and he immediately gives her the best place to stay and the best foods and the best treatment and everything. He really sees, I'm sure he sees kings and queens and deals with women all the time, and he knows a woman of, you know, that has what's right at heart for everything and has love in her heart. And he's looking for somebody for the king, I'm sure, because he has to deal with her. And let's see, what else? Okay, now Esther's in there, and she's taken the 12 months of beauty treatments. Oil of myrrh and 6 months of perfumes. I'm sure there was training involved in that. They trained the women how to act in the court and whatnot, because most of them had never been in a court. And during this reign, let me get that up again. Okay, Babylon. What's the word? Portia. Okay, reigned that 127 days. I got this here somewhere, in amongst about a pile of stuff to talk about. Okay. Between the time of go get her and the time Esther's married is how many years? I wrote that down here somewhere. Okay, she was in palace. Okay, she was in the palace for 3 years before they were married. And in that 3 years, he wasn't there that much because he went off fighting the Greeks. They made a campaign against the Greeks. In fact, some scholars think that 180 days and stuff was about planning that battle. And they lost badly and kind of drained down the money coffer from the country. And he wasn't looked very well on that he had did this. Esther became queen about 479. So about enough of me looking at, look at that. I got one more batch of that. Okay, we'll continue on. I got to get busy. Or am I going to get through this? Okay. Long story short, she's really liked at the palace. And another long story short is she did what the guy that was in charge of her, she did exactly what he told her to do. And she won the heart of the king. And she was married. And he threw her a big banquet. I'm sure that's one time she was able to be out in the somewhat public and not be held back by her king being queen. Mordecai kept telling her what to do, watching over her. Did we see God in that one? That was 2. Sort of. Put her in the right place, got the right people to her, softened the right hearts for her to bring her as queen. I'm sure Mordecai thought the only thing that would be the best for her would be become queen, not become one of the ones that he may not do nothing with, his concubines. And then Haman plots to kill the Jews. Well, Mordecai sat outside all the time at that gate, and the king had took Haman, the one that didn't like the Jews, and put them, exalted him to the biggest, like a seats. Back then it was the seats, at at a banquet or at anything, you got the best seat. In other words, you're honored above the rest of them at there. Well, he let Haman be the one honored there. And he also let him carry the signature ring. They used to stamp that thing and make those laws. He put him second in charge over everything. And he didn't like it that Jew just wouldn't stand up, wouldn't bow and honor him. He'd stand. And he wasn't going to put up with that. He decided he would kill all the Jews because of the history in his past, of course, and of that Jew. So he tells the king about these terrible people. It's going to cause him all sorts of troubles and all sorts of woes, and kind of makes him scared of them, like they're terrible. Now, if he told him they were probably one of the more peaceful bunches in the land, they never gave any trouble, would that got the king there? But he held back so the king didn't look at them closer. But he kept telling him this and that, and he would even throw, I forget how many, a bunch of gold or silver in if he'd do it. And time he was done, he said, "Nah, keep your money and you go ahead and do what you want." So he made a day coming up in the year that anybody that hated the Jews could go out and kill them that day, not have any reputation, no problems. And sent that throughout all their areas. They had a vast, you think of how big that Persia became, and how hard it would be to send a message from here to there. South America had runners. They ran between the cities in some of those kingdoms down there. But they used fast horses. And sent this all over. Well, as soon as Mordecai got wind of this, what was going on, he got his sackcloth out and ashes and went. And he couldn't go in and sit at the gate, in beside the gate of the palace. He was out on the outside and mourned in the square or outer area. And as soon as she figured out that he wasn't there and he wasn't, giving her usual pep talk, she sent somebody to find out. And then she found out, and he brought back the message, "Hey, you're going to have to go to the king and talk to him about this, or all the Jews will die." And she sent back, he says, "He hasn't sent for me for a month." That meant he hadn't sent for her at night in a month. And she was worried that her pull over him wouldn't go, because she entered the hall where he was at and wasn't invited, she would be put to death. He had to extend his scepter out to her, and she had to touch the end of it before she was saved. It saved her life. But if he didn't feel like doing, he wanted rid of that queen, he would just pull the scepter back and she would be killed. So it wasn't hard for him to get rid of a wife. Just put her in a position that she needed to come see him or something, and put her in a spot. Well, of course, he could do about anything he wanted. He told her that she needed to do that. And then he come back with a very good ending. And they're going to destroy not all the men, all the women, children, and everything. Did you see God in that one? Sort of. But sort of not. He's got something going, don't he? Okay. Let's see, where am I? Here we go. And what's interesting about they took them into captivity, you kind of remember with David, how they were taking the ones that were smarter and didn't need a lot of training to do jobs and whatnot. They took them into captivity. They used the people that they took. They did. They used the people they took. And Mordecai must have been, he was a lot smarter than you think. In fact, they think he might have had something to do with the court at some point in time, and maybe him and Haman got into it. But that's not listed in here. That's someone's thought or reading something else. Yeah, it's coming. Well, wait a minute. Maybe I mixed over it. But anyway, he did. He took in, was listening to, good catch. I almost forgot to put that in there. He was listening to a couple guards at the front door and found out they were going to go kill the king, and told her, and she told him, and it credited to him. And that's coming up. He didn't get anything for that. That's the big thing. And it's not credited for him. And so, let's see here. Where am I? Okay. For if you remain silent, he tells Esther, at this time, relief and deliverance of the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but what you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Yes, he moved her up to the royal position for something like this, but it also says if you don't do it, God will raise someone else to do it. And we've seen that before in the Bible. And she tells him, go and don't eat for 3 days and fast. And she's going to have her people fast. By that time, she would have had people. So Mordecai went out and did what Esther asked. And fasting, prayer comes with fasting. That's not mentioned here, but prayer comes with fasting in the Jewish tradition. The next morning, that night, the king can't sleep, so he has one of the people read him from his stories of what he's did. And he accidentally finds a story of Mordecai and said, what's been done for him? Nothing. Well, the next morning, the morning was almost there, and here's Haman had discussed all this with his people and decided to put up a 75-foot pole next to his residence and to impale Mordecai on. He was going to ask King the next morning to do that. And guess what? He comes in and he says to Haman, well, what should I do for somebody that I think great of and I think I should, do something for? He thinks, who's he thinking of? Oh, me. Oh, so he tells him about put a robe on that you've worn, a horse of yours with a crest on it, and have the person lead him around the town and say, this is what the king does for somebody that he wants to do. And he goes, ooh, that's a good idea. You go get Mordecai and give him a robe. So he takes Haman and shoves him to do the job. I would like to have been a mouse in the corner and heard what they had to say to each other. Do you not? Would it be interesting? Or they had a bad? Would they have closed their mouths and just did it? Yeah, that's my opinion too. But that would be nice to be a mouse in the corner. And, okay, so we get that all just done. He comes home, and he tells his wife all about what happened first thing in the morning. She says, oh, my gosh. it's going to be the end of you. This guy's honored that much? And guess who shows up? People take him to Esther's banquet, because what did she ask him when she went to him and got the courage, asked God for the courage, and went to him? What did she ask him? Oh, come to a banquet next day. But he told her he could have half his kingdom. But she asked Haman to the banquet too. So he gets pulled out, and he goes to this banquet. Then at the banquet, she says, well, you two come back tomorrow, and I will tell you, because he asks her again, what do you want? I'll give you half my kingdom. And says, no, you come back tomorrow and bring him with you. So they come back tomorrow, and boy, he goes home, and he's raving how great he is. He says, Esther brought me and the king to her banquet. And they were talking, and they were really hyped, and so he goes back to this banquet. And the king comes up and asks again, and says, I'll tell you what, I want my life. What do you mean, your life? Well, I would be killed. There's a bad person that has made a law and decree that kills I am a Israelite, a Jew, and the decree says that I will be killed. I want my life. And the king says, who would do such a thing as this? Starts carrying on. He says, well, he's right here, Haman. Oh my. The king got extremely mad, went out into the garden, and while she was gone, Haman decides, I got to beg for my life. So he goes over to beg for his life. He's probably down on hands and knees in front of her when he come back in, and he thought she was going after her. And he gets mad, and the servant says, he gets ready, get him out of here. Well, they covered his face up and took him out. He didn't get a chance to even say anything. And one of the servants, he says to one of the servants that was serving, what should I do with this guy? I don't know what I do. Well, he's got a pole outside of his house. Maybe he could go have him impaled on there. Well, I'll just have that done. So Haman got put on a pole. And then it comes down to the law has been set. So the king says, I can't change it. She asks, she gets down on the floor and begs him, and he just gives her this thing and touch this. And he says, we'll do what we can do. And he gave the signature ring to Mordecai and literally told him to do what you wanted to do. Make a law. Do what you need to do. So they made a law that the Jews could not go out and kill people for a day. They could defend themselves. Anybody that came after them that was armed, they could kill them, and they could take the plunder from it. They did not take the plunder from it. Not in any recorded area. They did not take any plunder. Some get kind of bad about this. They think it's bad that they went back and killed at that time, but they were only told to defend themselves. And at some point in time, the fighting wasn't over, and Esther goes in front of the king, could we extend it one day in a certain place, because fighting was going on. And so he extended it one more day because of the fighting. And then it was done. And then they put a decree in that should be a celebration day, and sent that throughout the whole area. And in the end, I don't know how the end was, but right at that point in time, Mordecai became his second in charge. Esther was given Haman's estate, and she put Mordecai in charge of it. And Mordecai became very powerful. And the Jews they breathed air easier because they knew they had someone to help them. So, we see God in the last few? Yes, we did. That couldn't have happened unless the whole story, though. So sometimes you look back on your life and look at things you did. I look back on my life and see things that I did that I wasn't comfortable with, but they prepared me for right here, right now, what I do. So God's always working on you. He may not be saying tons of words to you, but God's always working on you. That's part of the lesson of this. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll do Job next week. I'm going to close. I hope y'all have a good week. We'll do Job next week. Hopefully I can do a pretty decent job on Job. Job's quite the thing. Just to read it, it's 28 chapters. I probably won't read every chapter completely, but I will go through it and try to get the gist of the story. This is an interesting book because I went to look for someone that was teaching it, and I noticed that everybody teaching it was a woman online. I'm not kidding you. Everybody I noticed that was teaching it was a woman. We thank you for everybody that joined us online or here. Well, we're going to close for today. Thank you.